one case in one court that applies to one, again, case that involves one company. So we disagree with the decision, so I'm not dismissing it as irrelevant, or else we wouldn't make clear our strong disagreement with it.
The same principle is going to apply to any other litigant that comes before the court. Since August of 2011, you have not had a 3-member board that has been confirmed by the Senate. This means that all those decisions are void. Any adjudication that they've handed down, any rulemakings that they've enacted during that time frame are null and void.
Well, this is a really important deal, I think. When you heard the press secretary say it's one decision by one court on one case, that's what you always say when you lose. But this is the most important of the circuit courts. And this is a hugely important decision. First of all, just psychologically and politically. It's the first setback Obama's had since election day. He's been riding high on everything, victory after victory, and this is an important setback. And it is likely to temper their penchant for ruling through executive orders and by administrative actions to go around or even through Congress, because this is quite a rebuke. This essentially says that this was, as we were saying actually at the time, these were clearly lawless appointments. The Senate was not in recess.
Let's explain this. The Senate was in what's called pro forma session. Republicans kept it in pro forma session, which means that they were doing some things, A.B. They were moving some things along. There were some things that were moving through, but it wasn't a full session. Democrats were disputing that, and that's when the president moved through these appointments, saying they were recess appointments. Republicans said we weren't in recess.
This is, recess appointments have always looked like a power grab, and they are. Presidents use them to slip through controversial nominees that the other party opposes, and George W. Bush did it 171 times. Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid figured out during the Bush administration how to make up these fake sessions that make it seem like the chamber's actually not in recess, to make it technically not in recess and technically in session.
Right, and, so President Bush didn't move appointments during those times.
Right.
But President Obama did.
Right. The White House is aghast, and they're shocked, and they're saying that this is an executive authority that has always been exercised, and it certainly will be again.
Right. But no other recess appointment had been done like this in pro forma session.
Right.
Yeah, but that's not a decision that the presidency makes.
I'm not arguing. I'm not defending their maneuvers. I'm saying this is why.
You said they were technically in session. Technically is a way of saying legally.
Harry Reid is the one who thought this up. It's a keen strategy. I agree.
And Bush didn't move any recess appointments during that time. Okay. Everybody, I just wanted to explain it, and I got down into the weeds. That's why I interrupted. But we went really into the weeds.
The other constitutional principle here is that each house of the Congress establishes its own rules. That's the separation of power. The presidency doesn't decide what the rules of the Senate are. And if Harry Reid is the one who thought up this way of being in session, even though it is technically in session, that is meaning it's legally in session, and that's exactly what the courts have ruled. And when you are legally in session, the president cannot make appointments that require advice and consent by not getting advice and consent. It is, and also in the private sector, where the unions flourished in the decades after the Second World War, when they essentially had no competitors because our allies and enemies were lying in rubble. Unions enjoyed their heyday. But now that we have international competition, if you have to stay in business and the unions are maintaining artificially high wages and tough work rules, as happened in the auto industry, you go bust. And that's why the unions are in inexorable decline in the private sector.
Every week, viewers vote for your choice online, and this our Friday lightning round, and it will be lightning. This week, Keystone Pipeline won with 44% of the votes.
He's riding so high politically, we saw it in the inaugural address, that I find it hard to imagine that he will cave to his extreme left on this, knowing what benefit it would bring. And now that the fig leaf of a Republican governor opposing it, who's now switched and proposes it, is now gone, I expect he'll probably do it.
A huge turnout on the Mall today for the March for Life. Some prominent speakers out there as well.
You are the voice of the voiceless. You are those who stand for love in a world of death. I have a question for those who don't respect and won't protect life. Can a nation long endure that does not respect the sanctity of life?
A lot of the supporters out there say they're making their fight in the States, Charles.
Look, this is a remarkable development. 40 years Americans have turned out in the freezing cold today in the hundreds of thousands because of a decision that was made by the Supreme Court that, as Ruth Bader Ginsburg, a liberal Supreme Court justice, once said, prevented a stable resolution of the issue. Regardless of how you feel on the issue, this is the worst way to resolve this issue. It was changing at the time. Reagan had signed the most liberal governor abortion law in the country. We would have been today at a point where the states would have worked it out, a messy compromise with a patchwork of laws. Instead, we have a roadblock. People feel that they can't affect a decision that they ought to affect, and that's why you have Americans out on the street. It should not be that way, but they'll be out there marching for another 40 years.
This has been a Sunfish production.